So, my name's Alan Carrick. My badge says I'm the Special Educational Needs and Disability Commissioner for Northumberland. So, you've got my speech in the pack, but if you arrived early, you virtually know word for word what I'm going to say. But this speech was written, finished on Monday. Well, what on earth could have changed since Monday? Surely nothing has changed since Monday. Well, this week and last week, an awful lot of things changed. We've got our Special Educational Needs Code of Practice, and that took a lot of time coming through, and some other reforms. So surely, for a few years, we just worked to that set of expectations, those rules, and every local authority and every parents group and everybody else, we'd work together to that. Well, not quite. Last week, the government announced consultations taking place this year. They want to change in April next year the way that education is funded right across England in every way, including funding for special educational needs. Some things next year you'll probably see is very familiar. So high needs top-ups for learners who need additional funding will probably look very familiar. The way that we apply for things and the process that we go through might be very familiar. But how much money Northumberland has to start with could be very, very different. And I say Northumberland, it won't be as it was because the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of Exchequer and the Education Ministers, in their different announcements over the last few days, have said that, on the whole, they don't want local authorities to have any role in most parts of education. They want funding and responsibility to go direct to all of the schools, and they want all of the schools to be academies or free schools, so they don't have a direct relationship with the council. So I hear that, and then I think about, well, what's left? What about S.e.n.d? What about people with disability? I've gone through the documentation, and it looks like the local authority will still have an organising role for those who have special needs or a disability. We might control some of the funding and decide how it goes, but only a smaller amount. The rest of it will be managed within the schools who receive direct funding. In the last 12 months, in Northumberland, just to give you a sort of a baseline, for learners with high level needs, last year for Northumberland that was £30 million. Then those with lower level needs and moderate needs, usually in a mainstream school, who didn't need a very high level plan or high level funding, well, that's a lot more millions. We'd be getting into 40 million, 45 million pounds. Already, about a third of that goes directly to the schools. I think most of it will end up going directly to the schools. So when you think about the local authority and the person who's responsible at the local authority, we'll have a different picture. I'll have a slightly different job, and you'll have a different picture, and we'll have to make that clear. So you understand what are the larger responsibilities of the schools, and what are the different responsibilities of the local authority. I'm announcing this just so you're aware, because you might have very strong opinions on how things should be. And there are lots of parental consultation questionnaires that the government wants you to look at and wants you to complete. So what I'll be asking afterwards is whether In It Together and the parents groups, whether they could send that information to you and to other people who couldn't make it today, so you express your opinions. So what's happened over the last year? Well, there's some news in here. Northumberland special schools are doing really, really well in their inspections. The new inspections we've had have gone really well, and that means that nearly all of our schools, bar one, is good or outstanding. And some of them have been outstanding 2 or 3 times in a row, which is fantastic. So Northumberland is a high-performing local authority in that area. The one school we have that didn't get good or outstanding this time has been seen again by the inspectors, and they've agreed that we're getting there. We're nearly there. So hopefully, right across Northumberland, without exception, we can say good or outstanding, which not many local authorities can say. Okay. Ofsted. My colleague Claire Brown's going to say a little bit more about that. But Ofsted, what they're looking for is changing. They inspect schools and all aspects of education. they're going to be asking some new questions. And one of the things they've told us, they've given us a nudge early on and said, we want local authorities more and more to know about what you think and what you feel at the different stages of whatever we're doing together. It could be a plan that you're arranging just for the school. They want the local authority to know, is that going well? Did people agree? Did it turn out well? We already check these things to a degree, but they want us to know more and more detail. If someone's going through an education, health and care plan, they want us to check more often. Are things going well? Were you included? Is there anything that should be different? Is the system right? How did it turn out for your son or daughter? More and more. Claire will say more about that. So, in Northumberland, we've got more children being born than before. Many decades ago, there was a gradual decrease in the birth rate right across England and including Northumberland. Well, recently, that's going back up again. So we need to find more nursery places and more school places. And if we've got more births, well, we're going to have more children who have special needs. So it would be obvious for us to expect there are more children with special needs. But it should go up at a certain rate. If the birth rate is going up, then special needs, you would expect it to go up at the same rate. But it's not. It's not. There are far more children being born with complex needs from birth than there used to be. Doubling, perhaps, and that's a big thing. That's a big thing. There are far, far more children who are autistic, especially those who have high needs. Those who are autistic and quite independent and don't need a lot of support, that population is despite the birth rate, has only increased a little bit. Surprising. The middle, those who need a bit of help in mainstream schools, but they do have some independence as well. It's increased, but only a little bit. But those who are very autistic and very disabled because of their condition has increased enormously. I sat down with the head teachers of our special schools. A few years ago, one of my colleagues did a review across the whole county. Someone who did my job before did a review across the whole county to see whether the type of schools that we offered, special schools, matched with the population as it was. And an update was done to make sure that physical disabilities and autism and learning difficulties, all the different kinds of S.e.n.d. were covered, and we had a sense of proportion. I did that check again, either side of Christmas. All of our special schools now, whatever we thought they were, are mostly autism, or autism is the second biggest thing in the school. But as well as that, there's another trend. Children, for different reasons, have very challenging social, emotional, or mental health difficulties. That's increasing enormously. Now, it used to be quite common, and it's growing for teenagers. If we expected an increase, we'd expect to see it in teenagers. But we have it for very young children as well. And sometimes it's the only need that that child has, or sometimes it's mixed up with other things. Perhaps they're autistic, and that's very difficult for them, and their emotions and behaviours. We always had some students like that, but it's doubled and trebled. So that means as a local authority, we've got to change what we offer, and we need more places. We need to build things. I'm going to say something about that. The government, at last, we hope. There are also more children coming into mainstream schools from nursery, from childcare, who have speech and language needs. It doesn't affect every part of the county equally, but it's doubled and possibly trebling. So speech and language is a special one. Most special needs affect someone equally for the whole of their lives. They grow, they change, they become more independent, but the special need is there to the same degree when they were 4 with a physical difficulty and when they were 19 with a physical difficulty. But speech and language can be very different. If we put in the right support and interventions, children who've got speech and language needs who are very young, a few years later can make really good progress. And perhaps some of them don't have a special need anymore. They've caught up with peers, they're independent, they don't need that extra support. So that's what we need to do. We do it already, but we need to do a lot more because the population got much bigger. Now, I talked about special schools. Here's an example. 5 years ago, our special schools, reception to year 11, school-age population, it was about 450, 500 young people. Now it's more like 800. And all of those cases are very complex cases with very high needs. But the government gives us the same funding as we got all that time ago. Now the government has promised through these consultations and reforms to make things fairer. And I was reading through the documents again this morning, and I also found a promise there that for the first time they're going to listen to our shouts that please, we need to build more classrooms. We need to build more facilities. We'd like to have more special schools or bigger special schools or special schools with more sites or special schools who do more things than they used to. We need to make sure that people don't have to travel so far to get what they need. Could we build things in the gaps between what we've already got? Well, for the first time, we've got a consultation from the government that says that by next April, they want to fix that. We don't know what funding sits behind it, but at last, thank goodness, we've got an opportunity to do what we need to do. Well, we did a count up, and I've been travelling to the different local school partnerships to talk about, well, we've got an idea about the special schools and that part of the business. We've got an idea about interventions with younger children, but what about adding to what we do in mainstream? Again, a predecessor probably stood in front of groups like this a few years ago and said, Northumberland wants to have specialist provision in mainstream schools to fill a gap, to make more local provision available. But what I'd really like is if we're speaking next year, that you find or you already know that in your local partnership there is something new, special, and a choice that you didn't have before that might be right for your son or daughter. Thank you for all the help. Some people here have helped me with writing new documents and making arrangements and taking information from parents. And, people have been preparing for a better local offer website for months and months and months. What I'd like you to see is the new website, very soon, and then you look at it and send me a message saying, do you know what, that works now. And I've taken some very simple principles about what we're aiming for. We're going to do it as quickly as possible. People said 2 clicks. You should be able to find it straight away, and then 2 clicks, and I quite agree. A home page that's got the right buttons on for what you need. The age of your son or daughter, the needs of your son or daughter, it's obvious where to start. You don't have to do a search. You know exactly where to start because it's there right in front of you. You click on that and you go to one more page. And that page will have a list of all the documents and guidance and information there. Nothing missing from the list that the code tells us to, and nothing missing from the things that you've asked us to do. So, In It Together have been very helpful and agreed to help us set up parents groups where we go into a school one evening, or maybe it's in the afternoon, and go into a school computer room, and we get a sample of families to go on the internet and check things for us. They might be checking information, or a document, or a website, but you check it, and if you agree it works, it says the right things, it's clear, it's not in jargon, and nothing's missed out. If you tell us those things, then we'll give it a tick, and we'll put a stamp on saying check by parents. So week by week and month by month, if you're willing to help either from home, because we can send things by email, or by groups that we bring together, if you can help us with that, that would be fantastic. If you say it's all right, it's all right. If I say it's all right, it might be. Right. The Prime Minister and now the Chancellor of Exchequer this week said that he wants all local authority schools to not be local authority schools. He wants everything to be an academy or a free school. So what does that mean? We've already got some academies. For S.e.n.d. and for the Code of Practice, what I really like about the Code of Practice is that it makes no difference at all. Your rights, your entitlements, and what your son or daughter should receive is exactly the same. The funding should be the same, the services should be the same, the support should be the same. Now, some schools offer a little bit more. That's all right. But just because it's an academy or a free school or an independent school or a local authority school, S.e.n.d. just cuts right through that. Preschool. September 2017 is going to be a huge change. Nursery entitlement used to be around 15 hours, and some families would take that up and some wouldn't, and some of those children would have special needs and we'd support them. And so if you had a nursery, quite often, maybe you'd have a group of children coming in the morning and a different group of children coming in the afternoon, and that's the business and that's the scale of things. Well, the government want to change that to 30 hours a week. That's the same as a week that a year 11 student doing his GCSEs does. 25 hours of curriculum and stimulation and learning and activities, and perhaps 5 hours with the break times and lunch times and so on. 30 hours a week. That's enormous. And for special needs resource, I talked about having to do more with the money. Well, if we have to do twice as much work and provision and funding for special needs learners who are preschool than we did before, that's going to cost a lot of money. It could cost millions. If we don't get more money from the government, that's going to be really difficult. Northumberland's jumped in early, and we've agreed to be a national pilot to try it out before we get to September 2017. So you'll see bits and pieces of this. We're trying to work it out. The government will give us some extra funding. We're going to make it work. We want to be ahead of the game. We'll see what comes out in the actual funding that we're given, but that could be really challenging for us. But it's a 5 minutes, and it's a great opportunity for children who need it. So we will support it. Post 16 and adulthood. I've got some notes here. This is the final page. We've got the change in education, health and care plans, but for any learner who has special needs, whether they've got a formal plan or not, we've got to change the language and the outcomes that we describe for young people who are 12, 13 or older, including young adults. Plans for years have looked for the next 12 months. What can we achieve? What could they learn in 12 months? What could they experience in 12 months? What could they progress to in 12 months? Are they going to change school in the next 12 months? That was the most common sort of objective, the sort of outcome, the aims that were described, and that was the logic that we worked to. And then we'd have a 12-month review. The government absolutely don't want that anymore, and I agree with them. For older learners, they want us to set outcomes, especially for those with a formal plan, which is towards adulthood, because the point of the plan is to get to adulthood. What's your life going to be like after education? Now, to ask that question when you're looking at a 4-year-old or a 12-year-old, that might seem a million miles away, but that is the purpose of a formal plan, and that should be the purpose of education. It's to get into employment, a healthy adult life, independent travel, independent living, whatever's appropriate to your son or daughter. So there's an exercise for Northumberland to do, and all of us to do, health professionals, social, everyone, to make sure that if you've got a child who's getting to that age, the conversation starts with what we're aiming for is that long-term outcome, and we describe how we're going to get there. So it won't be to attend a certain school, it won't be to continue in sixth form, it won't be to complete a course that they're already doing. It's got to be about getting to that other thing. And that's going to be challenging, because if we agree that someone isn't as independent as they need to be in a few years' time, well, we've got to do something about it. So it might change the way that we offer support and education over the next few years. Independence is the most important thing, employment wherever possible, and we want people to learn not just academic skills and school subjects, we want them to learn the other skills that they need to be successful adults. That's a roundup of what we've done. I've looked ahead, I've read forward. The agenda and the briefing that you're getting today, I really welcome this. This is really helpful. You'll hear some more detail on some of the things I've covered, but also some important things that we haven't covered. I'll be around for the full event, and so when there are break times and other times, if people want to have a discussion or ask a question, please do. But you might find I'm writing down some of the things you say, because if you say something where you want Northumberland to improve what we offer, I'm going to take that and put it in our plan like we have to. So thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for this first anniversary party. What a surprise. I do appreciate it. And whatever questions you want to ask, no matter how spiky they might be, I really welcome that as well. Thank you very much.